The discovery did not come from a red carpet or an official announcement. It came quietly, through fragments, whispers, and a handful of details that were never meant to connect. Jamie Dornan and Dakota Johnson, two names rarely spoken together outside professional memory, were suddenly linked by a private European escape. What made it shocking was not the destination, but the effort taken to remain unseen. There were no public schedules aligning their travel, no film project listed, no industry event that could easily explain their presence. Flights were indirect, arrivals staggered, and accommodations carefully chosen away from usual celebrity patterns. For two people accustomed to attention, this level of discretion felt deliberate. The question was no longer whether they crossed paths, but why those paths were hidden. Jamie Dornan has built his public life around restraint. Known as a family-oriented figure, he has consistently avoided headlines that invite speculation. His appearances are measured, his words cautious, his private life guarded with near discipline. A secret journey, especially one requiring silence, stood in quiet contrast to that image. Dakota Johnson, on the other hand, has long existed in emotional open space. Independent, elusive, and often photographed alone, she carries a reputation for navigating life without clear anchors. Her movements are harder to predict, her choices less explained. Still, even for Dakota, this particular disappearance raised eyebrows. What unsettled observers was not romance, but coordination. Timelines that overlapped too precisely, locations chosen too carefully, and absences that went unexplained. No assistants were spotted, no familiar friends appeared in the background. This was not a casual overlap, but something planned. Those familiar with European celebrity travel patterns noted how unusual the routes were. Smaller airports, off-season locations, and private transfers hinted at intention rather than coincidence. It was as if visibility itself had been treated as a risk. For people used to being seen, that decision carried weight. Speculation moved quickly, but quietly. Some suggested a confidential project, something experimental and undisclosed. Others dismissed that idea, pointing out the lack of crew movement or production traces. The silence from both sides only deepened the uncertainty. What made the story harder to ignore was timing. Jamie was believed to be between commitments, while Dakota had just stepped away from public appearances. Their simultaneous withdrawal created a vacuum that invited interpretation. In that vacuum, the escape took shape. A small detail changed everything. A brief mention from a local source, nothing dramatic, just an observation of two familiar faces keeping their distance. No photographs were released, no statements followed. Yet the implication lingered, refusing to disappear. The absence of denial became its own language. In a world where publicists move quickly to correct narratives, the lack of response felt intentional. Neither Jamie nor Dakota rushed to clarify or deflect. Silence, once again, became part of the story. For fans, the reaction was mixed. Some dismissed the idea as overinterpretation. Others leaned into the mystery with curiosity rather than judgment. What united them was the sense that something was being withheld. Not necessarily something scandalous, but something private. The contrast between their public personas and this secretive behavior sharpened the intrigue. Jamie, so careful and contained, stepping into a space of risk. Dakota, so open yet evasive, choosing concealment. The pairing felt improbable, which made it harder to ignore. As more details surfaced, none conclusive on their own, the pattern became clearer. This was not exposure in the traditional sense, but revelation through absence. The less that was confirmed, the louder the questions grew. And at the center of those questions stood a journey no one was meant to notice. By the end of these first revelations, certainty remained out of reach. What existed instead was tension, possibility, and a growing sense that this escape mattered. Not because of what it proved, but because of what it refused to explain. And that refusal would soon demand a closer look. As the story continued to circulate, attention shifted from where they went to why they chose not to be seen. The secrecy itself became the focal point, louder than any photograph could have been. In an era where silence is rare and clarification is immediate, The absence of explanation felt intentional. It suggested not chaos, but control. For Jamie Dornan, discretion has always been more than habit. It is part of how he protects the boundaries between career and home, image and reality. Any decision to step outside that structure would not be taken lightly. A hidden escape implied deliberation, not impulse. For Dakota Johnson, privacy carries a different meaning. She has often spoken about the need to disappear when life becomes too loud. Retreat, for her, is not avoidance but survival. Still, choosing to do so alongside someone else reframed that instinct. Theories multiplied, none able to stand alone. Some pointed toward creative collaboration, citing their shared history and unspoken professional respect. Others leaned toward emotional refuge, two people stepping away from expectations rather than toward each other. The truth, if it existed, remained carefully layered beneath speculation. What complicated matters was the lack of narrative correction. No friendly denial, no vague clarification about work or coincidence. Public silence is rarely accidental at this level. It often signals that whatever the explanation is, it does not fit comfortably into public consumption. Those close to the industry recognized a familiar pattern. When privacy becomes essential, movement becomes quiet. Locations are chosen for anonymity, schedules adjusted to avoid overlap, and communication narrowed to a trusted few. This was not the behavior of people caught off guard, but of people preparing not to be noticed. The idea of romance, while tempting, felt almost secondary. The more compelling question was what both of them needed to escape from. Jamie's carefully maintained stability and Dakota's emotional openness exist at opposite ends of public expectation. A shared retreat hinted at a mutual desire for something neither public role could provide. As days passed, the story refused to resolve itself. No new evidence emerged, yet interest did not fade. The lack of escalation kept it alive, suspended between assumption and restraint. It became less about exposure and more about absence. Fans began to project meaning onto that absence. Some saw it as proof of intimacy, others as coincidence inflated by imagination. But even skeptics acknowledged the unusual nature of the situation. Too many choices aligned, too many variables removed. What made the escape feel significant was its ordinariness. No grand gestures, no dramatic revelations, just movement away from visibility. That ordinariness suggested intention rather than spectacle. If there was something to protect, it was being protected quietly. In many ways, the escape mirrored their public personas in reverse. Jamie, known for structure, stepped into unpredictability. Dakota, known for ambiguity, chose careful concealment. The inversion itself became a clue. Eventually, attention turned inward. Viewers began asking not what happened, but why it mattered so much. Perhaps because the story touched on a shared fantasy, the idea of leaving everything behind without explanation. The appeal was not scandal, but escape. As the noise softened, what remained was unresolved. No confirmation, no denial, no conclusion. Just a brief moment where two public figures stepped outside the narrative written for them. That moment, undefined and unclaimed, lingered longer than expected. In the end, the exposure revealed very little and suggested even more. The journey did not confirm a relationship, nor did it deny one. It simply exposed the lengths people will go to protect what they are not ready to name. And perhaps that was the point. Not to be seen, not to be understood, but to exist briefly without interpretation. In that quiet European escape, Jamie Dornan and Dakota Johnson did not offer answers. They offered absence. And absence, when chosen, can speak louder than any confession.